Hello and welcome to the Gunner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown podcast. Episode 2, of course, where things start sort of kicking into gear now as we get into the main structure of what we want to deliver with these shows. Of course, I'm joined by my main man, Drew. How you doing, mate?
Good morning. How are
yes,
you?
we'll skip over how the American is feeling this morning. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time to talk about football because it seems like what's that famous Jurgen Klopp quote? The most important of the least important things in the world. And I think that's probably the best way to start football up right now. But we're going to try and stick and keep your mind on the footy. And to do that, we're joined by a fantastic guest who you will recognise if you've been watching our Tactical Breakdown shows, because he's our go-to man for all the French stuff. It's Jeremy Smith. How you doing, mate?
Hi, good, thanks. You?
Yes, all good, surviving, it's fair to say. So, yeah, we were saying off air, actually, that this lockdown situation has given you time to relax in certain senses. But we're working hard now to get this content out, and we aim to do that with some top-quality stuff. So we're sort of here to talk about William Saliba and the centre-back situation surrounding him with Jeremy. And then towards the end, me and Drew are going to have a separate section talking about David Luiz's situation and some other centre-back stuff, because it's fair to say that Arsenal's centre-back area has been one of major controversy in terms of nothing being done right by the club to sort of solve the issues we've seen over the years created by poor signings, starting off going all the way back, and Jeremy knowing well, Squillaci signing to all the way forwards now with, as we've already mentioned, in David Luiz and Mustafi and the like. So it's been a bit of turmoil, it's fair to say, at Arsenal centre-back position, but hopefully, fingers crossed, Arsenal finally done something right in the signature of William Saliba, which of course they signed from Saint-Etienne last summer for around 27 to 30 million pounds, and of course sent him back on loan to Saint-Etienne. And Jeremy, what myself and Drew and the listeners are really sort of interested to know is how the young guy has fared after going back on loan. So educate us, talk to us about him.
Yes, I mean, the last season has been probably it's fair to say, quite difficult for him. Not necessarily when he's been playing, but he's had quite a lot of disruption because of a couple of injuries. So the season started with him being out with an injury that he sustained during the summer and meant that he'd missed the Under-20 World Cup as well. He came back for sort of half a dozen games, looked excellent as soon as he came back, and then got the old metatarsal injury, which kept him out again until the new year. So overall, across the whole season, and actually it's quite relevant in terms of how much Arsenal are going to eventually pay for him, he's played literally one match less than a third of the season. That's kind of crucial because if he plays one more match, which would be the Coupe de France final, Arsenal have to pay €2.5 million more. So it's actually quite relevant. So yeah, obviously the fact that he's only played a third of the season shows that, you know, he hasn't really been able to have much of an opportunity to kick on and you know, carry on fulfilling all the promise that he showed last year. And then at the same time, Saint-Etienne have had a freakishly bad season. I think when the season ended, I think they were fourth from bottom and you know, were in real danger of possible relegation. So you put those two things together and it's been pretty difficult for him. When he has played, certainly in that little portion between the two injuries, he looked excellent. When he came back near the end of the season, not quite as good, but really coming into a difficult situation. Yeah, he still helped the team qualify for the Coupe de France final. So all the ability is still there. It's just frustrating that he hasn't really been able to kind of push on that upward curve throughout a whole season.
I think when Arsenal signed him, obviously there was a lot of competition towards the end with Spurs, and for a minute it looked like he was going to go off there. When we finally got him, the classic Arsenal social media hype began, and all of a sudden it was the next coming of Sol Campbell and Kolo Touré. So there's a lot of pressure on this guy. Drew, I'm interested in terms of like an Arsenal fan perspective. When we signed him, how much were you sort of aware of Saliba? And secondly, how much of an impact of the pressure put on by the Arsenal fans do you think that will impact him this season?
Well, I think anyone who watched football was aware of his existence, but for a lot of us, it's probably where it begins and ends. You know, like French football is not my specialty in terms of domestic players. Obviously, you know, Bundesliga is that, but I feel like as a fan, you know, a lot of people and I don't like it personally, but I think a lot of people, all they can do is cling to things like YouTube compilations and such. But that doesn't tell you what a player is really about. You can find any player in world football, make a 2-minute video, and make them look like the next best thing, right? So, but I think Arsenal fans have this, and I don't mean to generalize, so if it comes across the way, I do apologize, but there's this almost, I think you just kind of brought up, we have such a history of doing so well with bringing in good young players and seeing them blossom over the years, especially under Arsene Wenger. I think fans are almost, in a way, crying out for that again as a hopeful thing to sort of cling on to and to watch the club progress. So I think that's where a lot of the hype comes from. More of, I think it's massive over the top optimism, but then when you see experts speak about it, you kind of do have something to be hopeful for. So, I guess as a supporter, one of my questions off the bat for Jeremy would be simple: how do you think the injury is really going to affect him moving forward with Arsenal? Obviously, that kind of railroaded his progression, given his age. He has a lot of growing to do. How do you think that'll affect him coming into the club this summer? And do you think he can actually make that immediate impact that a lot of fans keep thinking that he can do? Or do you think he still has all that legwork to do? Does he really have to fight for his place still, considering, when he comes back in and then when Mavropanos comes back from his loan, we have 7 or 8 center backs at the club if everyone stays. So how do you think that's going to affect him moving forward, at least initially? What's that initial challenge for him going to be? I think that's really important for us to figure out.
I don't think the injuries should be an issue. The first one was a hamstring issue. I mean, if that was some kind of recurring thing, then maybe it would be a cause for concern. But that one hasn't come back. And then the metatarsal, it's sort of, freakish, not freakish because they seem to be quite common now. But it's, that's no indication of some kind of serious problem. It's just the kind of thing that happens with the light boots, I guess, that footballers wear nowadays. So I don't think those should be a problem. I think possibly the fact that he's only played sort of 11 league matches this year, a couple of cup matches besides. It just means that, even maybe having a full pre-season, possibly he's not entirely match fit and match sharp when the new season starts, whenever that might be. But I think everything that he's done so far in his career, he's shown such a good sort of temperament. He's kind of gone further than he should have done for his age group at every stage. So I would expect that he's going to be hoping to be going straight into the first team. But at the same time, he is still a kid. He's still sort of 18, 19. And again, I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. I don't think he's the type who's going to sort of cause any big problems if he starts off on the bench and is waiting for his opportunity, even for sort of the first few months or so of the season.
When we look, I mean, a lot of the people in the chat box are saying that they could already sense the sort of incoming pressure from the fan base. But I'm really sort of intrigued about the dynamic about the centre-back that he's been playing with at Saint-Etienne being Fofana, who's also still a very young guy. Do you think that actually will help Saliba in the way that he's not had an experienced centre-back next to him for the prolonged periods at Saint-Etienne? Or actually, you can enlighten me, because I know about Perrin being there previously. Was he a partner the year before this? And would that help him with the experience? Do you think he's learned a lot from that partnership?
That's the thing. He's sort of played half the time with Perrin, who's one extreme. He's the kind of Saint-Etienne legend who's in his mid-30s now. And if the season had gone to its full conclusion, he probably would have retired at the end of the summer. At the end of the season, he's debating what to do now. And then at the other end, the other extreme, you've got Fofana, who weirdly is actually a little bit older than Saliba, but Saliba is sort of considered the more senior centre back. So he's played with the two extremes, and I think he's done really well with both. I mean, arguably, even when he's been playing alongside Perrin, he's kind of taken the lead, because Perrin seems sort of so short of confidence and, not even close to his best levels. And it was almost Saliba sort of pulling him along than the other way around. And then with Fofana, they're used to playing with each other in the youth setup. They were with Saliba had moved to the first team by then, so didn't play in the final, but they were both a part of the team that won the Coupe Gambardella last year, which was the sort of blue ribbon youth tournament in France. So he's used to both extremes and seems to be able to adapt, and he learns on the job. He learns quickly, and certainly has taken stuff from both of them. He's talked about how, with a player like Jan and Villa in front of him, who kind of before his debut said to him, "I've got your back. However, even if I'm surrounded by 3 people, if you feel pressure on you, give me the ball. Don't worry, I'll help you out." So I think he's shown that he can sort of meld in with the older players and also both fit in, but also take a lead with the younger players. So whoever he plays alongside and whatever the sort of balance within the Arsenal team, I don't think he'll be phased either way.
I think there's a lot of sort of apprehension about the sort of partner that he will have at Arsenal. I mean, Beast Titan put a fantastic comment. We're planning to get rid of Louise, then we're going to stick Mustafi beside Saliba. We are going to have 6 meters of social distancing in the back line next season, which is a fantastic statement. And then there was another comment slightly further up talking about the experience next to him. Tiger T mentioned that I think Pablo Mari will come good as a possible partnership with him. We're looking to take on the Spaniard as full-time this season. Drew, if we don't sign anyone else in addition to Saliba, are you concerned about that backline's quality, or do you think the permanent signing of Mari next to Saliba is enough to carry us through an entire season next year?
No, I don't think so. I think when you look at it on the strength of it, when Arteta's come in, everyone just seems more assured, right? The fans might be a little perturbed about maybe some of the quality that we have available. I was never a fan of Socrates, obviously, and then Mustafi has his many detractors. Louise might not be here. People are still unsure about Mari, but what matters is how Arteta has been drilling the team, how organizationally, how we're doing in that regard. Our form was pretty good defensively before the break, so I'm not all that concerned. There are other teams in world football that have worse, defensive options on paper that defend quite well. That's really kind of all that matters. So no, I'm not really concerned. My concern is, if he's ready, can he come in and do a job? My bigger concern would be about him as a player. And the one thing I also wanted to ask Jeremy about is, so you already have all these stories coming out, whether they're true or not, we don't really know yet, obviously, on the real strength of them. But about Guendouzi not really getting on in his maturation as a person, not as a footballer. He's done quite well. He's still quite young. He's 20, 21 years old. But a lot of people are saying he hasn't matured behind the scenes yet, and that it might be causing a rift at the club, potentially with Arteta. So when you look at Saliba now, he's 19, right? So when you look at him and you see how well he's done so far, say he comes to Arsenal, beds in quite well, is in the first team each week, do you see him having those same issues from a maturity standpoint that you see with Guendouzi a lot of the time? And Guendouzi publicly has shown them through his own personal accounts or through accounts of teammates. You kind of just see that he's still very much a kid, even though he's 21 years old. Where do you see that going with Saliba? Do you think that how it's happened for him as a player, maybe things we don't know about him as a person, something about his upbringing, we're not really sure, but he seems quite more mature as a player. Maybe he can handle that pressure being at a big club and arguably the biggest league in the world. How do you think he'll settle with that? I think for me, that's the bigger question, because it's all well and good if he comes in, if he has the goods in terms of who he is as a player, but who he is, mentally, that kind of thing, that does have an effect, and a lot of times it's very adverse. So my another question and concern for me would be that it wouldn't be who's around him or what we have available. It would be how he himself gets on in his own development mentally as a player.
I think obviously it sort of remains to be seen how things go, how successful he is, how quickly he gets to that success. At 19, Nasri seemed like a good guy, so things can change quite quickly. But everything that he's done and shown so far has all been good. Like I said, even in terms of leadership, sort of, there's a kind of apocryphal story of the first Saint-Etienne match after their youth team won the Coupe Gambardella, and he's sort of in the first team changing room. The team are about to come out for the match, and he sort of turns to his teammates and says, "Come on, let's win this for the kids." And everyone's sort of laughing at him because he is one of the kids. He's just forgotten about that. So he sort of immediately fitted well into the team. He comes from Bondy, which is the same sort of suburb of Paris as Kylian Mbappe, and Mbappe's dad was actually his first football coach. And Mbappe, you know, he is now starting to show a little bit of arrogance at times and all that kind of thing, but generally temperament, no trouble off the pitch or anything like that. And he always attributes a lot of that to his family sort of keeping his feet on the ground. So I think, you know, taking that as an indication that Mbappe's dad was one of his first influences as well, I think certainly he's had the good grounding, and I think maybe Tom and I have spoken about it before, but I think often it's forgotten when someone is leaving their country and going to a whole new culture and maybe being away from their family and things like that. Things can go one way or the other, and you could have a Guendouzi or, you know, a Dembele in Barcelona who's not really adjusting to life in Spain, let alone the football and the fitness. So you have to wait and see, but certainly everything in his career so far suggests that he's going to be mature and you know, good about it and take everything in his stride without going overboard.
I think that, I mean, the pressure that's going to be put on him is going to be huge. We know that. But I think what will be adding more pressure is if Arsenal don't reinforce in that area, because he will be looked upon as a new signing, because that's effectively what he is, even though he's been technically an Arsenal man for a year. He just hasn't been playing there. Speaking of which, there are some names from France that have been thrown up in the media and across social media as well. The most sort of potent one that was thrown in, and it's died off a bit now, was Axel Disasi. Of course, Jeremy, you featured on a tactical breakdown about the young guy. What is the hype around this kid, and do you see him moving on possibly to an Arsenal or to anyone else this summer?
To be honest, in France, I wouldn't go so far as to say there's been hype about him. I mean, Reims have had a really good season. They're sort of good guys within the league because they've got, you know, a really rich history, and a lot of people are very pleased to see them back in the top division and doing well. And they've sort of quietly had a very effective season, and Disasi's been a big part of that. But I think because of the way of, even more so maybe than the Premier League, there's so much focus on the likes of PSG, Marseille and Lyon that a lot of the other teams get a little bit forgotten about, and Reims are one of those teams. So it's been noted that Disasi's having had a good season. But yeah, maybe hype is a bit of an exaggeration. And it definitely looks like he's on his way this summer. The president has more or less said so. They're a selling club, like most French clubs are, really. And when he's been asked about clubs being interested, and I think maybe it was Sevilla who were interested, the president more or less said, nah, he looks like he's Premier League bound. But he wouldn't give any indication as to which team. He just kind of said, look, here's a clue, keep an eye out for the English newspapers. So it looks like he's coming this way, and certainly Arsenal are the club that have been most heavily linked.
Yeah, Sevilla is an interesting one as a club in France. They seem to bring in and have a lot of success. I mean, you look at Ben Yedder, did really well, has gone back. Monaco has had a fantastic season, and Clement Lenglet as well before he went off to Barcelona. Arsenal seem to, I don't want to say use the words hit and miss, but Arsenal have had some players from Liga that have just been Marouane Chamakh, for instance, and then we've gone down the line of signing some absolute worldies from France. Before we let you go, sort of as a final question about French football and Arsenal, do you think that since Arsene Wenger moved on, and since Unai Emery came in and now been followed by Mikel Arteta, and I'd argue even towards the latter years of Arsene Wenger's reign, there's been slightly more of a disconnect between the French influence on Arsenal, and do you think that's possibly a mistake? Because for me, I see golden generations of young French players coming through at the moment, and I think there's a lot to take advantage from Liga. Do you think it's an avenue that Arsenal need to sort of rekindle in French football to take advantage of that?
I don't think there's any doubt that there's still huge, really good depth within the French league and the French youth system. I mean, for me, it's just when Wenger came in. I mean, even Wenger himself, there was such a sort of I don't know about snobbery, but all the English media were like, who the hell's this guy with the big glasses? No one's heard of him, sort of thing. And I think there was just generally that attitude, maybe to a lot of foreign players and foreign football. Chelsea were beginning to bring them in, but the first thing Wenger did before he'd even arrived was to bring Vieira in, and practically no one had heard of him then. And I think he was just sort of tapping into this whole wealth of talent that no one else knew about. So I think part of it is that other people have caught up. Part of it in recent years, definitely the last 2-3 years, I mean, all the decent young French players seem to be going to Germany. I don't know what it is. I know that I was reading the other day, there was a big profile about German football and their connections with French footballers in L'Equipe, and they were saying that the top German clubs have now got 2 or 3 scouts each sort of embedded in France looking just for French talent. So I think it's just that beforehand Arsenal were pretty much monopolizing, if you want, that sort of network, and now they've just got a lot more competition. I know a couple of Arsenal fans who think it's even something to do with shirt sponsorships, and it felt like at one point Arsenal was signing more German-based players than French players, and they think that was some kind of influence and to do with Puma. Yeah. I don't know about that, but I think it's just maybe
and all that lot.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know if it's just a little bit of sort of taking their eye off the ball. The fact that obviously Wenger and Remy Gard and Gilles Grimandi, they had really strong links, and then obviously it kind of snowballs when you sign 1 or 2 players who settle and do fantastically. Then others are going to be more interested in joining as well, and maybe it just needs, again, like 1 or 2 real success stories for them to become the go-to club again. But it definitely has fallen off from what it was, and I think it's a real pity. I think within France, Arsenal are sort of, a lot of people have a soft spot because of that great team and the Wengers and Henrys and Perez's, and it would be great to sort of rebuild that connection again.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of a melting pot for a lot of talent right now, and it's something that definitely Arsenal need to rekindle that relationship, which we've seen slightly now with Saliba and Guendouzi as well. So maybe it's back on the rise. Well, Jeremy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, mate. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you on Twitter?
So I'm on Jeremy Smith 98, and you can also see me doing stuff for French Football Weekly and Get French Football News.
Brilliant stuff. Real pleasure, mate. We'll speak to you again very soon, I'm sure.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming, Jeremy.
See you. Thanks.
So, Drew, it's a lot to take in, I think, regarding sort of centre-backs and Arsenal, because as I sort of went in with the intro, we've looked at sort of centre-back situations at Arsenal that haven't worked out. We've looked at centre-back situations at Arsenal that haven't been dealt with in terms of who we've signed. Do you see any hope at all of Arsenal adding to this side this summer? And how do you feel like the need to add is this summer?
Again, I don't really know if there's a need. I think there's a want.
Why wouldn't you say there's a need?
Because I think you kind of, it's not always about the pieces of the puzzle. It's about the person putting the puzzle together. For me, again, you already have seen, and everyone's been talking about it, you've seen the drastic improvement in a lot of key areas under Arteta since he's come on board. So I think we need to give that time. And also, we're in a position right now financially, like most other clubs in the world, where it's not going to be easy to go out there and just start dropping cash on players just because you think we need to improve. I think we've already seen a lot of the improvement, and I think this is the discussion we should be having after this coming season, or after the completion of, I guess, the current season, depending on how we do. But I think the players deserve time under Arteta to see if they actually can. Everybody can turn a corner. I remember we were talking the other day. Well, not you and I, but I was on Twitter talking the other day, and I was delving into the Coutinho rumors, and someone said that we should be getting Coutinho to replace Mesut Ozil, and then me, I got my hair up in my back just a little bit, and I was just saying that because the person in question said that Mesut Ozil's been Arsenal's worst player, and I said, well, hold on a minute, before Arteta came in, 90% of the first team players at Arsenal were poor. Really, you had maybe 2 or 3 of them that really on any given day were in decent form, but everybody else was struggling. And I think that tells you almost everything you need to know, that no matter the quality of player that you're speaking of, everybody was struggling under Unai Emery. Arteta's come in, and everybody, almost everybody, has had a marked improvement in their performance levels, including Mesut Ozil. So, and that also includes the defenders. You know, I think you would struggle to find a rational thinking supporter that would say that the defense, including Georgian Mustafi, hasn't improved since he's come in. And I think that kind of gives he's arguably improved the most, and arguably been one of the best center backs we had apart from David Luiz since Arteta. No, since Arteta's come in. And I think that's enough for me. You know, it's enough for me for the rest of the season to look at it and say, you know, I think we have enough to at least give us that good building block. If moving forward, we, you know, again, it's hard to say that we want to bring more players in as well when we have so many center backs already at the club. You know, if David Luiz decides to stay, or if we decide to keep him, you know, if Socrates decides to see out the rest of his contract, you know, Mavropanos comes back, you know, Chambers, Holding, you know, a lot of them, 7 or 8 center backs. At that point, you can't think about bringing another one unless you know for a fact you can get rid of 2 or 3. We're already carrying too many as is, so I think we've got to go with what we have. I think the biggest issue is the center of the park in midfield. I think for me, I think that's if we're going to spend any money this summer, it should be there. I think we spoke as such on the last show, really. I think we're okay. I think Saliba, I'm not going to say he's going to be like a new signing because he's not, but I do think that given that everything Jeremy has said, everything that other experts have spoken about, you know, and mirror similar thoughts on the matter, that I think that just that alone could be enough to really give us maybe a little bit of a shot of the arm and that extra bit of quality that maybe we're lacking. But I do think we have some players right at the club who can do a very, very good job under Arteta for now, at least until we know what everybody's future holds.
So the last sort of section of the show that I want to cover is on the news about David Luiz, because he's seemingly the biggest question mark that we've got. Arguably even at the club, because the Aubameyang stuff and the Lacazette stuff's died down. There's not too much news being surfaced, and the big news is on what happens with David Luiz's contract. So I put in the chat box, I said that we're going to be chatting about him. Let us know what you think we should do. Joseph Masako is pretty set on saying bye-bye to David Luiz. Archie says that he would keep Luiz for 1 more year, but I wouldn't be unhappy if he goes. Sims says, depends on how Arsenal see it. If they want to get rid of Mustafi, Luiz, Socrates, then they have to buy someone. Archie also says that he wants to get rid of Socrates and Mustafi before we get rid of Luiz. O'Malley says, no way we keep Luiz if it's going to cost us 15 million. Peter Renner is talking about, for me, the time for Arteta will be next year. Most of our top earners will be gone, which obviously could include David Luiz in that as well. So it's seeming that the people don't seem to be too bothered by the idea of David Luiz moving. It surprised me massively when I saw that it was costing us £24 million for him for 1 year. Now, I remember when I was on Terry's show the other day and I was saying, David Luiz, when you think it's a decent deal, it only cost us £8 million for 1 year. And when you think about it in the long term, actually, wages and other fees, it added up to, according to The Athletic, £24 million, which if that's for 1 year, how much on earth is the likes of Ozil and Aubameyang and Lacazette costing us year on year? Because that's ridiculous. That's so much money. So is he worth extending for 1 more year? I mean, the links are that he could be going off to Benfica to return to obviously the club where he sort of developed before going to Chelsea. What's your thoughts on the Luiz situation? Do you keep him for another year, and do you expect us to keep him for another year?
I would say under normal financial circumstances, we would probably keep him. Again, you know, despite what everyone says about the rumors that always are circulating in the media about particular center backs, I won't name them. But I do think that he came on strong under Arteta, did bring us a lot of quality in certain areas we needed as a center back. I think he did well. I think Arteta likes him as a player. I think we probably would have kept him, but when it came out about the actual financial circumstances surrounding him as a player and his wages and how much it's actually costing us, you have to think that maybe the club might want to part ways just under that basis alone, not because they don't think it's good enough, but just because we might not be able to really, is that the kind of money we really should be spending, for another year, or what we've already spent under him. So I think he could very easily leave. If he does leave, I'm not going to be annoyed if he leaves, but I think we could use him. But if he does depart the club, I think we'll still be all right. And Mari, you do have that left-footed center back that you want. Again, Mustafi showed that he could come in and improve. If Saliba comes in, and if he does hold true to all the promise surrounding him and his ability as a player that we've already seen at Saint Etienne, then people aren't going to be worse aware about it. But I do think I would like him to stay, just because I think he did very, very well for us. And I think right now it's less of people would be a good thing. Continuity would be a good thing. Just, we need the players who performed as well as they did to sort of see it through with us, maybe. But I think he's a little bit of a bright spot. You saw the kind of that leadership. He did take a lot of the younger players aside during the matches, and he was trying to put them in the right direction and really share his experiences as a player. And I think that was invaluable. I don't think we really had that at the club with a lot of players over the years, and that was always nice to see. And I think that he aided in certain areas in some young players' development, certainly at least mentally. And I think you can commend it for that. But with modern football, you really can't get attached to players, no matter how they perform. So I prefer to keep him, but if we do let him go, then you hope that Saliba could come in, and then that's just Luis is out, Saliba's in, and then you still have that continuity I was mentioning. So I think we'll be alright either way. But
yeah, the thing about David Luiz is that I get the incompetence of his plan. I think someone put Joseph Masaka said that Luiz is an incompetent centre back, and maybe that's too harsh as a single adjective to describe what Luiz is about. Yes, he's got a mistake in him. Yes, he can be rash, but
so can all of our players. So that's the thing. That's it's a current trait. So
I genuinely think that he improved us ever so slightly. But I think that he improved what we had. And I know that a lot of the obvious response to that is that it's not hard to improve Arsenal's centre-back situation. But I do think that he was an improvement. It did. I wouldn't say it was a massive excitement when he joined, but it turned my head to when we signed him, maybe because more of the stature of the player that he is and what the deal and coming from Chelsea. But he added a different dimension in terms of his passing and his distribution. And I think that keeping him, say, over Socrates, I would be fine with that. If we kept him over Mustafi, I think and most of the fan base would be fine with that. Although, as you said, Mustafi has arguably been the highest improvement amongst all of the defenders under Arteta since he joined. So it's a catch-22 for me in that area. It's Saliba comes in with a huge amount of pressure that is entirely not his fault, and it's not the club's fault either. It's unfortunately that the world that we live in as an Arsenal fan base and as an Arsenal player that he's now moving into that world. And I'm looking at people's sort of predictions for the lineups for next season that they're putting out already, and Saliba features in every single one of them. I'm so far yet to see one that doesn't include the young Frenchman in the team, and that is so much pressure. But this David Luiz situation needs to be, for me, sorted out soon, so that we know what we're going to do, so we know what the plan is in the summer. Because if we let him go, I don't think we necessarily have to sign someone, as you mentioned, and you talked about how we've already got so many centre backs. So you think about it, we've obviously got Saliba coming in, we've got Luiz still here, we've got Mustafi, Socrates, Holding, Chambers, Mavropanos, Marie. We've got so many centre backs at the club when you think about it. None, but just the fact is that none of them are top class right now. And I'll include Saliba in that because he's not developed enough to be considered as such. So for me, whilst I think bringing in a centre back would improve us, I don't think it's the main area that we need to focus on. I think on last week's podcast we talked about the midfielders, for me the most important area. But it's going to be interesting week on week, and as we do these shows, sort of where this develops and what people think the main areas tactically Arsenal need to focus on, especially when the games restart on June the 17th against Man City. This show will sort of transform into talking about being able to see it on the pitch and what that might mean. But in terms of sort of final thoughts on the centre-back situation, Drew, what are you feeling Are you feeling confident with the cohort that we have? Confidence in our centre backs is a weird combination of words to use. But do you think there's hope? Is probably the better question.
Yeah, again, I think so. I don't know if I would have the same sentiment if we haven't, if we're going into Arteta's first match, or if we haven't seen the improvement across the team, but we've seen both those things already. So I think that's where my confidence comes from. It's level-headed. Anything can happen, and it's going to be difficult to measure because we were, the players are getting into good form. They're understanding the manager. Things just seem much more cohesive on the pitch, and then you have everything that's happened with COVID, and then you've had the pause in the season. And if whoever has been watching Bundesliga since it's come back, you've seen a lot of clubs and a lot of very good players come in and just not been in any semblance of decent playing form. And it's taken some a couple of weeks to really get there. Some have hit the ground running, obviously, but a lot of players have struggled. So you have to wonder what we're going to see as a product in the pitch when we play against City. And ironically, you can't get a bigger test when you come back from a situation like this. So it's going to be difficult, but I would say overall I am positive. Again, just going off the basis of what we've already seen under the new manager. I do think, again, despite a lot of the predispositions about the players who they have, that they still have something to give, and they were starting to really show that. And I think for very simply that the confidence was coming back, and I think that was the biggest thing. The players would take the pitch and know that maybe we can get a result against some of the biggest clubs in the league, and they were assured of themselves, and something we haven't really seen for a while. So I remain confident. Obviously, there's always a chance to really improve the players we have at the club. You should try to do it, but again, what we have with right now, I'm fine with. I think we'll be fine. Simple.
No, I tend to agree. I'm excited by the Saliba signing. I'm excited to see what actually happens. I'm just praying that, say, in the first few games, if he does get some minutes, or even if he doesn't start, the biggest thing is if he doesn't start and people start shouting at Arteta for not starting him, I think people need to be a little bit more realistic than that, maybe. And if he does play, if he makes a few mistakes, that he doesn't get set upon straight away, especially in the media as well. So that's going to be really key. That's going to round off today's show. Thank you ever so much, people, for tuning in to episode 2 of the Tactical Breakdown podcast. Please make sure you drop a like on the video. And I have to say, over 1,000 of you watched the first episode, which when you're doing a brand new show, you don't know how it's going to go. You don't know who's going to tune in and watch it, especially at the moment when football content is at an all-time low in terms of watchability and the people that are around watching them. So thank you ever so much to all of you loyal listeners that have watched us back each week. We should also say, what I didn't get to mention last time is that I'm putting these out on SoundCloud. So if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this on playback and wishing that you could lock your phone or minimize it so you can do something else on your phone, because we all know phones are our lives these days, you can watch these on SoundCloud. They obviously go up a little bit later than the YouTube edit, because obviously when these go out live, I need to do all the editing and stuff. But it will be out there on SoundCloud. I'll make sure I put it in the description of this video as soon as it is ready. And of course, you can find all the information on Twitter at Laguna Talk TV. You can find Drew at FM Lera. Thank you again, my other faithful friend. Much appreciate it.
It's definitely time to go have coffee. So
you see, I saw someone earlier on in the chat say that we can tell when he's not had coffee yet.
Well, I'm glad people have learned. It's very simple.
And also for our members on the channel, I'm going to be putting up an update about the membership stuff very soon, because after this whole lockdown thing, the membership thing has gone a bit skew with. So thank you ever so much to all those that, of course, have been contributing to the channel and helping with some of the financial side of things, because that's obviously helped us purchase our brand new intros, which me and Drew were hugely excited about. It's fair to say, when our good friend Joel came through with those. So we're very, very looking forward to seeing where this goes. There's going to be an update for members on the channel on the community tab this afternoon. But other than that, stay well, stay safe. Obviously, keep yourselves in as safe a place as you possibly can. Thinking of everyone out there, of course. And we'll see you again next week for another Tactical Breakdown podcast. See you soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.